Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming today. So my name is Oliva Sartogo and I'm very pleased to welcome today here in Mumbai, Batool and Maitham. And I wanted to first of all sort of give you a general introduction of vernacular architecture in Bahrain and sort of give you the context of where, first of all, I met Studio very Danish and how I engaged with them and how I was really impressed by the work that they were doing and the work that the country was also doing. Um, so here I've put together some pictures and some images of um, some projects that I find really interesting in Bahrain. I think we all have an image of Bahrain, which is more linked to their oil and maybe the last sort of evolution of the country. I wanted to give a sort of like frame. This is Bahrain CPC by when you look at it from the old part of the town, which is the Pearly Pad, which is a project that the city has been developing since the 2000s. And you can see the skyscraper at the end, but this is the old Curly Path era. And what was really interesting is that the city decided to give us an identity and sort of created this part of the city that was sort of abandoned and make it more contemporary, make it more alive, make it connected to the city, the more like the skyscraper part and the more active part of the city, and to bring back life into this area. And they invited international architects and local architects to collaborate. And I think that's an incredible example of a place where vernacular architecture became a study for international architect that developed the firm there. Here you have a picture actually of Anne Haltrop, a studio, and he actually then started having his own studio in the Pearly Path and developed his firm from there. And he's now today one of, I would say, most established, very established architect developing projects all over the world. But his research in Bahrain and in Pearly Path was for him a very important moment where he studied vernacular architecture and he integrated it into his projects. And the same for other international architects that developed projects there. They managed, through the scope of Bahrain government that was asking them to work into such an incredible historical area of the city, which was, but the Pearling Path was where they had the commerce of the pearls, which was a huge commerce until the end of the 18th century, something like that. And then of course, the whole economy of Bahrain was around the pearl commerce. And so this part of the city was a very important part. And it's beautiful because you have still all the architecture from the time. And it's sort of like, and today they try to sort of link with a new contemporary way of seeing it. And I think that's a really interesting starting point because in a way, architects like Anne Haltrop or Studio in Danish, by having this chance of working with historical context, but creating a contemporary interpretation, they included that and they sort of exercised something that could be very theoretical into a very actually practical, and using those materials and testing them and seeing how they react, and then bring them and make them sort of part of their practice. And then you can, bring it around the world and have this attitude towards history and towards the past into the future. So we're not talking only about glass and steel, but we're talking about limestone, coral stone, old technique, courtyards, old shading techniques, and all things that are break that we should not abandon, that we should actually bring into the future. So here's a picture of, for example, the Biennale of Venice this year, the Bahrain Pavilion won because it actually brought a solution to a heat, and it brought a solution looking at the past here as well, but in a contemporary way. But I mean, I'm not going to dive into the detail because it might be a bit too long, but it's to give you a bit of a context of our talk today, and to give you an idea of what's happening over there and why I think it's really interesting to have architects from Bahrain and the research coming here today in Mumbai and sure having a conversation with you. That's where I would start. So starting with the first question. So as we were saying, vernacular architecture is deeply rooted. Traditional structure often utilize locally sourced materials such as coral stone, mud, palm frond, which are well suited to the hot arid climate that they have in Bahrain. These materials not only provide natural insulation, but also reflect the region's rich cultural heritage. What does vernacular architecture means to you, and how do you respond to the genealogy of a place in your projects?
Hi, thank you everyone for coming. We're happy to be here today and the honor for this conversation. I think I thank you for the introduction. I think it gives a nice overview of where we come from and what we are encountering on daily basis. And I think for this particular question, what vernacular means to us as a practice is something that we have been developing ourselves, inspired by everything around us, but there is not a single formula of what vernacular means. So in Bahraini Danish, for example, we like to think of vernacular as existing knowledge for anything that is available, that is accessible. We think of as vernacular. Maybe when we think of this particular word, we think of something that had existed for generations and generations, which is true and it could be true. But additionally, anything that is currently practiced, we think of as vernacular. So if you ask me what is vernacular today in Bahrain, I would say cotton stone, lime plaster, clay, but also I would say aluminium. I would say steel. I would say concrete, because this is the knowledge that we have today for making and for bending, and yeah. And if we think of vernacular, just shift that mentality that not it doesn't have to look traditional or look old for it to be vernacular, then I think we have a much wider understanding of what the word means.
I mean, as I said, we've taken because of utility and it's kind of a case study. But I think the important thing for us is that we take it as what's the present in Bahrain can be considered as vernacular. And so that's how we're going to get it, but I mean, with this project in particular.
No, I think also one of the quirks that was quite interesting. For example, when I visited you back in 2019, was that your studio is already sort of linked to materials, linked to tradition, because you're into a beautiful pottery and family street like environment, and so I think your idea of integration with vernacular it's much more straight away in a way, because your contact of where the studio is already linked to the past, and as you said, to materials that could be, of course, limestone, pottery, mud, but also contemporary one, like the past 50 years used there.
No, you're absolutely right. I think when we think vernacular, we also think easy access, right? So there is an existing space that is made in concrete. We think it's ridiculous that you demolish it and build something that looks vernacular, no? While this already exists. So something already exists is already has a jump start on the concept.
So your piece sometimes are not strictly furniture, but architecture and miniature. And you're suggesting the desire to scale cultural narratives beyond ordinary objects. Which elements of Bahraini traditional architecture do you feel most important to you and to preserve? And which are the ones instead of where you need more modern adaptation and goes towards that?
So to understand, to better understand, to better answer this question, it's important to understand what Bahrain is. Bahrain is this tiny island in the Arabian Gulf between east and west. And since ancient times, we're speaking, 5,000 years ago, Bahrain has been the place where his cultures would meet and would cross, right? And it's extremely evident in our traditional architecture, in our traditional clothing, in our traditional foods, um, even the culture itself, the language itself, everything is a mishmash of these cultures that had met and keep meeting in Bahrain. So there is one element about Bahrain tradition I would like to preserve, and I think is worth preserving, is this exchange of cultures. I think it's on conceptual level is the most important thing. It's not a particular element of this or element of that that is worth keeping, but it's this exchange that is the most important. It's evidence in the projects that you showcased in the beginning of this talk, and it's evidence that I'd arguably say every successful project in Bahrain has an exchange element to it.
Which is also the name of your studio and the way you set the studio, because you have an office in Copenhagen and an office in Bahrain. You have a co-founder that is based in Copenhagen. So it's sort of how you also envision the exchange. I mean, in fact, you also talk about Danish traditional architecture and tradition.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to break up, and maybe it's a point that I'd like to elaborate a little bit more on. Because say if you go back in history up until the modernist era, so we're talking 5,000 years of civilization that is based on exchange of knowledge, uh, of cultural influences, right? And then we arrive to the modernists. Even the modernists, you said the modernist buildings built in the 70s would have a very local case to it because they would mix and merge with the existing culture. But then we get to a strange period afterwards where it becomes importation. Maybe due to the larger region influence, and also how Bahrain would later develop, where we have all these um, cities popping up all around us, and based on the model of importation. So when we first started Bahraini Danish, it was a very important conversation for us to have. What does it mean to have something that is Bahraini and Danish? And when we looked in history, we saw examples in archaeology, in architecture, in data production, um, of expertise and knowledge imported from Denmark to Bahrain, and it's always imported from Denmark to Bahrain. And when we looked one step back, we actually saw that this is not how Bahrain was founded. It was always a merger of it, right? So when we call ourselves Bahraini Danish, we also had this responsibility to define what Bahraini Danish means, and as much as we can push it away from the Gulf importing from Europe.
I think what's important to understand about vernacular architecture at Bahrain that is very open and it's very multi-use is that one thing doesn't exactly being that is specific mean that every single space can be used for different things. Everything is open to each other. It's basically Bahraini architecture is basically a space for social interaction and not only the ones to speak. And so there are many elements within architecture that is defined as very happy. But I think maybe one important thing is the courtyard and how a courtyard can be a central of a space. And we really took it as an example of we carry it to our projects. And we try to learn from it. So not only as a client element, but also like a social element.
Yeah, which in a way brings me a lot to Incan architecture that has a lot of folkloric that is out of and I see the influences and the keeping the traditional, and I think that's we were talking before, and you said 35% of Bahraini citizens today are coming from India and from other places. So also how to integrate them into your social life and their traditions, which also have that courtyard in this case, but how yeah, I'm wondering how you have this as a culture, like this interaction with other cultures, and how you see it particularly. You kind of mentioned it, but
I think also here we need to clarify a little bit on the history of what means to be Bahraini, right? Then literally yesterday, looking around at this extremely busy fair, looking at faces that reminded us of friends, of people that we know in Bahrain. We're like, oh, this looks like this person, or this looks like this person. While we are across the ocean in a completely foreign place, but we feel very much at ease, very much at home. Familiar faces that we see all around us. And then it got us talking for the rest of the evening. What does it mean to be a Bahraini, right? It's part of our name, so we have to know. No, like we put ourselves in a position where we have to know. And I think one important thing to know about Bahrain is that it's not exactly Arabia, because Arabia is the peninsula where Arabs had the majority, the ruling in this peninsula for pretty long time, for thousands of years, and developed into tribes and families as a country. It's very it's a very straightforward ethnic place, no? And then you come to Bahrain, this island that has Arabs and has a lot of Arabs in it, but also has people from all over the world. So if we look at any Bahraini today, there would most likely be a mix of East Asian, of Persian, of Arab, of different, maybe even Western Coast Arabia, maybe even the Levant, all mixed in this one place, and it makes it extremely easy for us to adapt other habits, if I got other cultures, but also to be open to different nationalities nowadays, that we have these strict borders between us. When someone comes from outside, it becomes almost normal because we always are aware that he came also from somewhere.
I hate with that in mind. We take that into consideration with our as making mention at the beginning, that we, for example, looking at materials, we look at what's present in the same. And a lot of things, I mean, we don't have that many natural resources in Bahrain, so many that it's our poetic drama pride. But I think with the craftsmanship in Bahrain, I think we look at materials as this one thing that's important, but then it's with that specific aesthetic that's present in the country.
Yeah, and more in details, if you had to think about some of the projects you had developed, or I remember it when I came you with this beautiful stool that then became also part of a narrative of exchange, no? If I remember.
Absolutely. The stool Oliva is mentioning is actually our first commissioned work, and it's made out of teak wood. And we don't have teak in Bahrain. The teak in Bahrain comes from India. The carpenter is Bahraini, is a boat maker, and his father and grandfather and great grandfather had always imported teak to Bahrain to build boats. So by the time we had that commission, and the client had specifically specified that they wanted to work with wood, and we know this carpenter through our work in heritage restoration, because also the doors and the windows of the nicest houses in Bahrain would be made out of teak. We go up to them and we say, look, we have made this sketch. It's not a finished sketch. We don't pretend to know the wood. We do not pretend to know the carpentry. But we'd like to make this thing, and we'd like to your input on it. And we didn't mind at the time that we are not being extremely efficient or extremely logical with the use of joinery. But if something will break our concept, just feel free to inform us about it. And then he asked that we'd like also your opinion on which wood should be used. So he says, if you want me to make it, I only work with teak. It's our wood, it's our local wood. And so I asked him, where does it come from? He said, yeah, obviously it's in his mind, because generation after generation it had existed, that it became the local wood. All my carpenters are used to it. All my carpenters know it really well. I know it really well. It's the only wood I'd like to work with.
Yeah, I think, and from there we developed that relationship with the craft, who is when could we go to for any projects that are very amazing, that we want this very feel out of them. But I think it kind of takes us back to a material that is local but not so local, and a craftsmanship that is very local but also is a collaboration and influence from other cultures.
Now, which proves that that's the way we were talking before, which is it's change and collaboration. And often you speak about how for you, and I was mentioning before in the question, but I think it was a very big question. And you often speak about how design for you is a form of architecture, how you relate the way you see design, or the way you see installation, because the one I've seen on Art App was big installation, and the pavilions you were mentioning before earlier. So how do you see the relation between these works that you do, and maybe you can give some examples?
Yep. I think we're one of the things that we're proud of is that we are not scared of changing our mind. Sometimes we say something, and then years later we take it back. We say, no, that's exactly not what we are. We have changed our mind. We have grown out of this. We became something else. Um, and we had said this statement before that we approach everything as architecture. But now I think it's more, and our background is architecture. We're all the three of us are trained as architects, so that was our way of thinking, right? But now I think it's everything the same. No, so after having done installations and furniture for many years, and we had our first commission architecture project, we would treat the architecture as design, you know, and
In the other around.
not even the other way around. I think it's just became one thing, you know. We think that every good project, every good product, whether it's a space or a piece of furniture or a piece of a publication, should have that one strong gesture in it, that one strong idea in it. And if you have that in mind and then try to fix all the functional pieces of it, you have a good piece of work. And it doesn't matter if it's an architecture or if it's a furniture. But for sure, what you said was our way of learning. When we approached how to make a stool, we would approach it how we would make a building. And then when we came to understand the stool better than we understood the building, and we went back to the building, we would approach it how we approach a stool.
Whenever we read this part of our practice, it's often very confused because we're not just designers, we're not just architects, and we're not just artists. And I think we like it that way. We like it that we do whatever we're interested in the moment. But sometimes making a chair, for example, is just as important as making a building. And the message that a chair, sounds ridiculous, but the message that a chair might develop is the same as, and so we really don't like to limit ourselves in kind of what between brackets. So we approach all the projects the same way.
And now, based on this, I have a question, which is linking. So, as you said, you don't have a one sort of way of defining. But what is your creative process, and how do you create that strong vision that you can do, as you say, for the soul, for an architectural project, and how you combine, like, where did it come from? How does it start? And maybe you can give an example of a project.
They're different for each project. It's I think there is a spark of an idea that normally one of us three would have, and sometimes it could come before a commission, before a project exists. I have an idea to make this like this, you know, and we would write it down on our WhatsApp group. It's like, guys, I have an idea to make a lamp like a chandelier, you know, or I have an idea to make a chair like a boat, or I have just, you know, these ideas, and then we'd have them in the back of our heads. Or I want to make a falcon out of tubes, like this one. Or I want to make you know, and sometimes it would be as easy as this. And then when the question comes for us to make something or to make that one thing in particular, you know exactly how to approach it because we had that idea already. Sometimes it takes weeks for us to come up with that one idea. And then what we do between the three of us is that we have to agree on this idea. Once we do this, once we agree, we know that that we have something good in hand, and it only needs work. You know, it's just work to make it happen. You know, it's only drawing, it's only engineering, it's only go in and outsourcing, then it becomes easy. If you have that vision, and then it becomes the role of one of us or two of us who would go ahead and develop that thought, but it would be the most importantly the role of the three of us to keep that vision where it is. For example, we have a recent. This is actually a funny one. We were asked to make a proposal for an art installation, and the curators were a little bit confused of what exactly we did, because we do a little bit of design, you do a little bit of architecture, you do a little bit of that, and for this they still had the vision that we could make it, but when they came with caution. They said, but don't make it too much architecture. Like use whatever you want, but don't make it too spatial. Don't, because it's an art piece. We want it to remain an art piece, and for that art piece, I think after that meeting, one of us said, I want to make something that moves. Because we think of architecture as something that doesn't move. We have this permission. We have no idea how it's going to look like, but we know that it's going to move. So throughout the process of sketching it and modeling it and engineering it, the three of us check every time that it still moved. Like, it still moves, right? It still moves? Go ahead. And funnily enough, when we presented to the curators, they were completely shocked. It's like, it's nothing that we have. It's not like anything that we have done before, and it's not anything that comes from our line of work.
In a way, you see art as movement. It's quite interesting in how you define then the difference through your practice, so through your response. And how, this was a question before when you started describing your creative process. Does it start with the tech? Does it start with the chair, the stool, or does it start with the idea of sitting? Like, how did it start? Like, with the material, with the like.
I think each project's different. Sometimes we're very obsessed with the material and we just think we want to make something out of this one material. For example, for a really long time, Maitham was very obsessed with rubber, and he was trying to find any type of project that he can use rubber in. That didn't happen yet, so we're still on that open soon. But sometimes it's just a commission, and sometimes you just ask that question. So sometimes you're just asked to make a stool. And so, but then how do you approach that question? It's our process. But yes, it's project by project. It's never linear. It's never one thing or the other.
And like I said, it's really that one idea, one line, maybe 2 words idea that is the most important part. And sometimes we would get asked to do something that we think, no, this is not for us. It's just too detailed of a description that it's not for us anymore. It's like we get asked to design a frame out of wood with this, keeping in mind these thicknesses for this size, and then becomes the brief for the project becomes almost everything that we have to decide on. So sometimes when we get asked like this, we'd either say no, or sometimes we say, let us think about it. And if there is not an idea that we can bring in to this brief that will take over the brief, then sometimes you simply don't do it.
I'm seeing a lot of images that you put together, and I'm wondering if there's some projects, because some of them we spoke about, but there are some more, I've seen some more architectural context of the town and some squares. maybe you want to dive into these projects and these narratives that we have been putting together and
This project we started it a while ago, and because in reality we started making before we had the studio, before the idea that there is a structure where we collaborate, that we take commissions, all of that. Before all of that, we were already making, and suddenly we found ourselves in constant motion between trade shows like this one or commissions here and there, without really having a full idea of what our studio would look like. So we started asking ourselves, what is us? What is bahraini? And we would spend so much of our working time just discussing what is it exactly that we are doing. Um, and out of this discussion, we said, yeah, but maybe we also would like to do this or like to do that. So we sat down like, what is this and that? Just say, what do you want to make, and we'll find a way to make it. At that time, I said, what if we wanted to make books? Like, you want to make a book? Yes. You want to make a book? Yes. Let's make a book. And so I started applying for funds for publications that we wanted to make a book. And to our surprise, we got
what the book about?
I'm getting there. No, to our surprise, we got accepted to make the book. And then exactly that question, what is the book about? We don't know what we are. We don't know what our book is going to be about. Why don't we combine the two questions and research within ourselves what is Bahraini Danish? So we made this book that we called Positive Encounters, because our conclusion was that Bahraini Danish is about encounters between ourselves, encounters between us and our environment, encounters between us and our clients, our potential collaborations. It's all about this, and should be all about this, not only about the work. So we made a book, but we asked ourselves, what is Bahraini Danish? And we put everything in it that you think Bahraini Danish is, which is about 50% the work and 50% almost daily inspirations, daily environment, daily encounters that we have.
So, for example, these images are all historical parts of
Some historical, like this set of images. This is of the town that our studio is based in. That is famous for pottery making and the Bahrain Arts, where we first met, which is
this is the UNESCO reserve here.
which is a big part of our practice. But then we had images of our daily encounters. These are contemporary photos that we took, some of them intentionally, some of them on our phones, of things that we found inspirational. And we wanted this book not to become a catalog of furniture pieces, but we wanted to be a book that we could ourselves return to for inspiration. We wanted to inspire ourselves before we could inspire others.
Yeah, and so the book includes historical pictures of our encounter with our daily lives, but also includes our projects, our finished project. And I think when you flip through the book, you understand where our designs, where our ideas come from. Here you see drawings, right? And that you go from the historical, the everyday life, to drawings, and then the images. Like you see that of that thread linked between them. We don't necessarily copy or replicate things, but we really like to keep things very open-ended. And we don't I think because we don't like to define ourselves into one thing, we also like our projects to be not to be defined in inspiration or and also finer form, and that's why we don't have any pictures in the book of like gallery images. We have pictures of our finished products, not as finished products, and sit as an open-ended projects.
Beautiful, which also brings us back to in a way, the purling path, which was a city that was very active, then sort of reactivated, and so it's a never ending sort of part of the city, because now it has a completely new energy that came in, and that looks at the past, but also gives to the present and the future, because it hosts also architectural firms that are developing new projects. So it's also their place that it's always in the constant evolution, and in a way never finished, because it gives at least that impression when you walk around that it's has a lot of past, has a lot of present, but it's also looking at the future, which in a way it's a interesting example for someone like me that lives in a city like Rome, who is a very historical place. And we always ask ourselves, how do we look at the future in such a historical context without creating only neighborhoods that are outside and that's new and the past is inside, which is what most of our cities look like today, but instead integrating within the historical context the future as a constant evolution, and as you say, the never finished product, and maybe more human and more ongoing and more used in the present.
No, no, absolutely. And in preparation for this talk, we had in mind that we'd have a lot more topics to discuss. One of them was the sustainability of the vernacular architecture. And again, to overcomplicate things, we don't think of sustainability as, or use the look of sustainability, the look of the green binding or checklist, or based on our line of work, we encounter a lot of this examples where corporate client would come and we say, this is our checklist for green practice or the green product. But for us, this makes absolutely no sense, especially that we think sustainability, first of all, is not only on how one thing looks, but it's the entire process of how it came to exist. So if we lose all wood in Bahrain because wood is sustainable, doesn't make any sense, because we don't have the people that would work with this wood. We don't have the wood growing anywhere near to us, and the wood would not sustain in our environment. So it has to be a full circle thing, which brings us back to the example that we gave. The burning path, I think, is an extremely delicate modem for how to live in a city sustainably, not by not using the ACs or not using cars or whatever sustainability nowadays looks like, but to have a place where it can regenerate itself within itself, that everyone who is part of the practice is comfortably there. It's sustained by the city.
Be part, because you both were part of most of this project, and also I guess you developed most of the research together with the architect, together with the community, together with the it's a yeah. I think that's an incredible opportunity, but also yourself, and you actually decided to invest into looking at this. And I think as a young firm, it's an incredible example of saying, we're looking at local materials, we're looking at local historical ways of and techniques and stories, like the one of the the tech wood for boats, and then it becomes this tool. I think it's a beautiful story and an example of attitude also. And as you said, it's the most environmental also friendly, because it by removing the ego and by removing it sort of gives you an opportunity to look at things in a different way and giving them a second life, a third life, a fourth life, and that's the most ecological in a way.
Thank you. Can you please have a big round of applause?